Hi, Beth.
Hi, Christoph.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christoph Flicker. I'm the program director of the MA in Translation and Intercultural Studies at the University of Bristol. It is my huge pleasure to talk to Beth Hickling-Moore, who is an alumna of our department, studied translation with us. Beth, tell us a bit about what made you want to study translation.
Well, thank you for having me, Christoph, first of all. I decided to study translation actually as a career change. I was a modern languages secondary school teacher for 10 years, and for a number of largely personal reasons, I needed to step away from the classroom. I had wanted to do further study for a long time, and it had always kind of been out of the realms of possibility. So when kind of life took a bit of an unusual turn, I decided that it was time to grab the bull by the horns and do what I'd wanted to do for a long time. Um, and having already worked with languages for so long, but in kind of a reduced capacity, like when you're teaching teenagers, you're not using your languages to their depth and breadth that you might want to. Um, I really felt like reconnecting with my languages, which are Portuguese, Spanish, and Italian, um, and doing something creative was what I really wanted to do. And that is why translation came in. I actually studied Spanish and Portuguese Hispanic studies at Bristol for my undergraduate and graduated in 2012. So there was quite a big gap, but I've always kind of felt an affinity with the University of Bristol and with the city, and had such a wonderful time on my undergrad that I gravitated towards the program. Um, Almost, in fact, no, it was 10 years after I graduated the first time.
A serial Bristol student, and it is a
Yeah.
great place, absolutely. I came here for 2 years, many years ago, and never left. So you decided to study for an MA in translation.
Yes.
Um, I suppose translation is a field with several entry points. Tell us a bit about what the MA has enabled you to do. What did you learn? What did you perhaps do on the program that you felt gave you a boost or lead into the profession that you're now very successful in?
So from the get-go, I knew that literary translation was what I wanted to do. I wasn't interested in doing any other forms of translation, creative translation, broadly speaking, but very much had my literary hat on, and my eyes set on that. Um, and that kind of started, I started the masters and started my career. They kind of came hand in hand. Um, and I was very fortunate in that I was allowed to study, to work on all three of my languages. Um, I think there had to be some shuffling, but the program coordinators and the teachers were very, very accommodating of the fact that I wanted to work on all of those languages, um, and have a depth of knowledge in translation with all of them and different tutors, um, and also in kind of tailoring the things that I wanted to work on, in a more literary field. So when I was working from Portuguese in the first term, I worked with Alexandra Reza, who works with French and Portuguese, who kind of opened up this world of Lusophone African literature to me. We worked on some texts from Angolan revolutionary um, diarists, and loads of different texts that really, really opened my eyes to thinking about Lusophone Africa as an area of focus for my work. I'd already visited Cape Verde a couple of years prior and really been drawn in to the literature and the music. Um, so that really helped to kind of foster that passion, um, and focus, as it were, because with literary translation, it is helpful to have a focus,
Mm.
especially to begin with, kind of what kind of literature do you want to work with? Because translation at the end of the day is advocacy, right? So what kind of translators do you want to be? What kind of authors do you want to be a voice for? Who do you want to be bringing to Anglophone publishers and saying this person's voice needs to be heard? So Alex did really, really help me in those early stages of fostering who I was as a translator and who I wanted to speak and I suppose write for. Um, and I also worked very closely with Rebecca Kosick, who is a wonderful academic and translator and poet, and really opened my eyes to the translation of poetry and more abstract creative translation. I found her very inspiring. In fact, because at the time I was the only person doing Portuguese over the whole year, it ended up just being the two of us, which I was incredibly lucky in that regard. And I said to her, you know, I literature is what I want to do, and she just said, well, that's what we'll do, and that's all we did. And so without the guidance and I suppose the passion of those tutors, I wouldn't have found my voice as quickly as a translator and really thought about who it was that I wanted to translate. And actually, the first ever translation that I had published, which was a tiny, tiny poem in modern poetry and translation, was a poem by a Mozambican poet. So I suppose that's like a nice convergence of those two inspirational members of staff on the MA program, and was the start of a lot of other things, which I'll perhaps talk about in a moment.
Yeah. I'm really pleased to hear it, and if I may say so, without putting words in your mouth, I think it's something I recognize about our program and our department, that we work very closely with students, that we try and listen to students' interests, and that we also take students seriously as professionals, as future professionals, but also as people who already bring a lot of expertise in whatever way to our program, and that we look at professional identity in the round. So no, I'm very pleased to hear all of this. You started by talking about the beginnings, the early weeks, perhaps the way your program was set up. We have to talk about where you are at the moment, which is a very prestigious place, and which links up to the end of your time on the MA, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I'm currently at the Fondation Jan Michalski in Switzerland, which is a foundation for literature and writing. The foundation welcomes more or less 50 residents a year, writers and translators predominantly, to come and stay in this amazing kind of state-of-the-art, bizarre institution in the mountains in Switzerland and work on a specific project. So I'm here for 3 weeks, and I'm actually working on a novel called O Sétimo Juramento by Paulina Chiziani, who is a Mozambican novelist. And in fact, I wrote my MA dissertation on the book. And very early on in the MA, Alex Breza recommended that I explore Paulina's work. I read her entire body of work, and this is the one that I was most drawn to. So I'm working on this book for Archipelago Books in New York, and I will deliver this at the beginning of June. So very exciting full circle moment. And in fact, I'm not sure if you know this, Christoph, but this story goes even further back because someone who's translated Paulina Chiziani previously is an emeritus professor at Bristol called David Brookshaw, who in fact taught me as an undergraduate in 2008. And then when I was back on the MA program, I got in touch with him about Paulina and kind of saying that I was interested in working on her books. And did he, could we talk about it? Perhaps it could be a joint venture. And he was so open and generous with his time and expertise, and also incredibly kind of gracious in saying, I'm very long in the tooth. You please take up the mantle, and I can help in whatever way I can. So
That is a fantastic story, and I'm again, it's something I recognize. Quite a few of the books behind me are translations produced by other students, and I am very keen for dissertation projects or individual study projects to then be realized in whatever form and be part of a more public conversation. So
I'll
it's
take
very
the
cool.
hint. I'll send you a copy when it.
That's not at all
You
what
can
I
just
meant.
ask me, Christoph. It's fine.
Please, Beth, may I have a copy?
You may, of course. You have it
Um,
on record now.
and we may even invite you to for a launch. I am
I
in
would love
fact
that.
going to a book launch by Rebecca Kosick, who you mentioned, this lunchtime. So the
Wonderful.
story continues.
Please send her my regards
I will do. Listen, Beth,
and
thank you so
infinite
much.
admiration.
Yeah, thank you so much for making time for this. It's great to catch up. And I wish you all the best. Your deadline is very soon, so I
Yeah,
shan't keep you
so
from your
I
work.
better crack on. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.